Good morning to all of you, and thank you, RethinkHR, for giving an opportunity to moderate this session. As you all know, we have two very seasoned and professional gentlemen who have, very rich experience in terms of addressing this apt subject on stepping into the boardroom. And I'm sure each of you, as well as me, is looking forward to their views and their advice in terms of how does one shape your thinking and your work experience in terms of enabling you to, one, address and interact with board members and also aspire to be board members. And I think this only comes with a very forward-looking experience, engaging with different sections of public life and dealing with various subjects which are of relevance, as you see, across the industry. With that note, welcome Sunil and Nagesh. What I would try and do is to utilize your time here with us this morning in terms of engaging on topics which we commonly see and read are of high importance, relevance from a boardroom conversation point of view. I think the audience will also benefit from your insights on how you see young leaders, coming through this learning phase and curve in terms of, as I said, addressing boardroom expectations and also aspiring to be boardroom members in the future. And obviously the canvas is pretty large in terms of what we could extract from this conversation. I would reserve some time for Q&A, given I'm sure there will be few questions coming in from all of you, and let's make the best use of it. Okay, kicking off, and maybe Sunil, I will start off with you. Data is never adequate. Everyone believes the more the better, and I think it aids decision making as well. From your perspective, how do you see the relevance of technology in providing you information which helps you in critical decision making? And also, if you could come in with a lens from an HR executive standpoint, what should one expect, or do you see, there is a wider use of technology amongst the HR community, which enables you from a decision-making standpoint?
Thank you, Ashwin. I must say your first question is one of the most difficult ones that you want me to address, right? If I talk about technology, right, data, insight, right, I could have spoken volumes on that for turning around and saying how today data has pervaded into the boardrooms, right, and we use a huge amount of granular data as we take a lot of business decisions, right, whether it is how my financials are moving, how my cash flow is moving, what is happening with customer attrition, what are business metrics that are being managed, right? So there is a huge amount of that we actually see in the boardroom coming through, which allows us to take, I must say, better and smarter business decisions. We are no more constrained by saying this is the only data piece that I have, but actually sitting in a business, you can turn around saying, can you drill down into that area, right? And mature companies who have the ability of doing that, right, enables us to have much more sharper business decisions, because you need to find where there is a gap and what is it that needs to be addressed. When it comes down to the HR side of it, right? I have personally not seen a lot of CHROs bringing that kind of insight into the boardroom, right? Very rarely have I seen a CHRO who will come and engage with the board in bringing together metrics or bringing together data or insights, which I might say are very different in nature, that can address the strategic agenda of the board. The only ones that would tend to come in would be related to attrition, would be related to probably, age of people in the organization. And, that's the kind of data that we might talk about. But if you take a look at the strategic agenda that the board has, talking about succession planning, talking about leadership development, talking about the culture of an organization, right? In all those areas, you don't find a lot of data being presented. And that is clearly something that, the board would love to have for saying, is there a way that I can figure out how the skills of my leadership team have improved over a period of time, right? Saying that, look, if I take a look at leadership skills, here are the 4 or 5 dimensions across which this is how we seem to be grooming our leaders, this is how we seem to be grooming our people, and this is how the intellectual capital or the intellectual value in an organization has gone up. If you take a look at it from a culture perspective, saying that here are the 4 critical culture drivers that we have in the firm, and how do I get better insight for saying how have I moved on these metrics? Not a lot easily done, but that is clearly where that we'd love to see that kind of thing happening, right? So that would be my point of view on how I've seen data insights being driven, particularly from an HR function perspective or through the CHRO's office.
Yeah, you touched upon very relevant topics in terms of succession planning, attrition, etc. I guess the data you were referring through could certainly be enabled and driven through use of technology. I guess a lot of developments have happened on this space. With that, I will extend that question to Nagesh, yourself as well. Data analytics, I think, very commonly and widely discussed in all spheres. How do you see this space evolving, and particularly in context to HR as a function and more wider in the industry, and how these two can get integrated to the point where we said how decision making could be far more sharper, faster, and efficient on this?
I think thanks for this question, and I think I'll endorse what Sudhir is saying. Data analytics or data that is being given to us as board member, I think there is an important thing that all of us need to think as a service provider to the board. What is needed by the people on the board? What exactly they are going to do with that data? And I think data analytics or giving you on a great kind of platform which gives you prompt kind of thing, these are all important points. But I think you can't forget what exactly is needed by these board members. So for instance, I would reiterate in this way, the priority of the board members is looking at the interest of the company first, interest of the minority shareholders of that company second, then look at other related stakeholders such as regulator, looking at your own community in which you are working on that particular part, and then remaining thing that you have to look at it is the promoter's interest also. So I think today what is happening is, if HR people are coming into the board, are they giving you enough data to come to a decision becomes an important point. And I think this is what HR guys should think about it, because they tend to give data what is known to them. They don't think from board's perspective what is exactly needed by us to come to a conclusion on that account. And in that, I always believe that when you go to a board, there is something called pull information and there is something called push information. So I think it is better that HR guys give us the push information so we have enough to get rid of what is important. We will decide on that particular part rather than keeping on asking it. For instance, a live example I can quote, and I think our friend is also on quite a few NRC, this nomination remuneration committees. Data given to us is sometimes so short, small, it doesn't give you everything. Then you ask, what are your KRAs? What are your things? Especially when it comes to ESOP, when it comes to the, increments and all. At that point of time, yeah, but then, HR has already taken a decision in favor of that employee, why he is, why you need to defend it. So that kind of thing can become a bit of a challenge, because I think board members, I have to think from my perspective, has it benefited company overall, or it has only benefited some, typical kind of companies. So I think when all of you who are HR people here who are working, who are youngsters, and at the same time, people who are planning to be on the board, you must know there is a role switch. And I think you need to be fair to both parties in that particular regard. And I think this is an important point. If HR guys are not going to listen, you will become more like a subject matter expert, and then we will keep on pulling information the way we want, rather than, looking at you as a leader who will give his views based on the information and give his views. That's what I will put it.
I mean, very, very relevant comments, Nagesh. I think I pick up two specific terms you use, service provider and subject matters. And I'll come to that in my next question. And so then moving on to you, just in terms of shaping up an HR professional's role and enabling them to be integral to decision making. To the point which Nagesh made about the push and the pull. How do you see, or rather, what is your view in terms of what is needed for a young professional to, provide what a board expects purely from an HR function and so on and so forth? And I think to the point of how do you make the gradual shift from a service provider or an enabler to a decision maker or a influencer towards decision making?
I'd love to turn around and saying that it's not complex, it's very simply and easily done. But in practice, I suspect that if I ask for a show of hands here, saying how many, I think there's a huge number of people who are here from the HRO community, right? How many members here work directly with board members? Can I see a show of hands? Right, so it's like a 50% crowd that works directly with them. Of that 50% crowd, how many of you work on strategic matters? Right, I mean, you see that thinning out significantly. And that's really where the biggest gap is, right? Everyone works on a lot of functional, tactical matters with the board, right? And the board is very happy even getting that because that is a need or a requirement. But if you really want to shape up, right, you have to work on bigger strategic matters of the board. And I think it's a two-way street. Personally, if I was to make a comment, I don't think boards or NRC chairs are doing enough to engage with the head of HR of an organization to turn around and saying that, yes, you must work back with me, I'm happy to engage back with you, we can talk about bigger decision things or bigger things that matter, right, and pull you upwards and out there, right? I think that is partially a role that boards must do and the NRC chairs must do that. Does it happen in the other areas? It happens in the area of audit committee, it happens in the area with the CFO. If you see, it has started happening on the risk side, it has started happening on the technology side. And I think this is where HR has probably lagged, and this is clearly one thing boards must do. But when boards do that, I think it is incumbent upon the CHRO to also try and understand what are real bigger things that boards would expect. My expectation, if I was to share, right? I would love for the HR person to talk to me about my organization structure in the changing landscape of what's happening in the business, in the marketplace outside, and is my organization structure fit for delivering to that? Is my organization structure enabling me to build succession plans at several different levels? Is my organization structure enabling me to bring in new talent in new areas, right? And how can we position those a lot better? That is just on the organization structure side, right? Similarly, if I take a look at our talent development or my L&D side, in this place where we say there is a war for talent, we know that there is new talent coming in, what is it differently that an organization must do to position itself as an attractive place for employees to come on board? What is it that an organization can do to provide talent to grow faster within our organization? These are all very critical matters that the board would love to discuss rather than only talking attrition or only talking compensation data and spending its time saying, no, maybe not an average 6% and let's go with a 7% and I think, we've done our job. Or when you talk about performance management and saying, so how are we doing differentiated performance management? Is that even relevant for us today? CHROs are custodians of the organization, right? Just the way we take a look on the risk side, we take a look at the other side. As a board member, I would love to have that independent view working back with the CHRO, either as an NRC committee chair, getting that input and working back with them, just like we work with other leaders. But for that, I think CHROs must also step up. They must have deeper insights into business, what's going on with our competitors, what's happening out in the marketplace, and how can they facilitate or enable us to think ahead of the curve. Thinking for today, thinking for 6 months, thinking for a year only is all operational plan. And unless you move yourself up to strategic level and have those conversations, I think you will also not pull up to it. So it's a both-way journey, but that would be my input out to the CHROs.
Well said. And as a chartered accountant, I cannot not make an analogy in terms of how I see human capital as the largest unrecorded number on a financial statements. You said CHRO is the custodian of that number, and I think all of you sitting in the audience equally own that thing. And with that note, Nagesh, I will ask you maybe, as an owner of this large goodwill, unrecorded goodwill on the financial statements, what would be your advice in terms of how, HR could lead to more strategic contribution in terms of how they would influence and enrich this particular aspect, if you could look at from my lens as an unrecorded item or more, abstract in terms of, the culture aspect, which is also equally important in terms of how it drives organizations.
I think having said all these things, I think I remember Harsha Bogle's one of the great talks, and I think it is there on YouTube also. He says, there is always a time when you need to move from subject matter expert to a leader. And I think this is where the transition of a HR person into a leader has to happen as early as possible. When he walks into the boardroom, you should know that board members are looking at the interest of the company, their interest of all the stakeholders who are minor. So any decision that they are doing, they have to look at the entire thing, which also includes the employees as one of the stakeholders. Now this is where, I think HR has to come out with right kind of perspective, more a holistic way of looking at life, rather than looking at my own figures and justifying it. And I think that justification number of times becomes a bit of a challenge. If somebody is saying, what is your attrition rate? Then if it is X, then people will ask you, compared to the peer, where do you go? These questions, if the board is asking, that means you are not giving that information. I would much rather go to the board with a holistic view to say, yes, I have a problem here. I am winner here. I am doing better here. And I need to work on this separately. So I think as and when the HR person talks to you as a more wholesome kind of way, and I've seen some live examples. One of the guy who was in fact the HR person, he has now risen to the board levels now. So is the case in Aditya Birla Group, when one of the person has become the CEO, although he was reporting, he was handling the HR function. So there are people like that. They will never ever tell you, and they will never ever defend it. They will on their own will talk about it. Where do we stand? Where are we on that particular part? And that maturity level, if it can come with HR guys as early as possible, I think he is really fit to become the CHRO over a period of time and slowly to get into the movement of as a board member on that account. So I think time has come for us to know that we can't be perfect in life. And I think this is where the thing comes from that perspective. And I always tell everybody, like for instance, I also come from, like you, from a chartered accountancy profession. And when I joined ICICI Limited at that time, there was always a competition between the management graduates versus chartered accountants. So you versus me kind of thing was happening. So at that point of time, I always used to say, how I am useful to the organization is more important than the, the knowledge that I come from or what I have gained it. Because what I have learned from CA, I can learn from MBAs at later stage as well. So I need to be complete on that account. So HR has to become an all-rounder. Rather than just saying, going to look at culture, I'm looking at succession planning, I'm looking at ESOPs, I'm looking at increments, I'm looking at that, that curve, where I'll take care of my 10% of the people, the remaining 10% I need to outplace. I think those things are important, but they are not critical at the board level because you are supposed to do that. If I am supposed to ask a question, where is our succession planning? That means you are a failure, damn it. According to me, you should come on your own.
I can sense the passion with which you express your views here, Rakesh. At least on the race between CAs and MBAs this morning on the stage, the CAs win. So, on that note, we spoke on technology, Sunil. As we started off. And I would maybe quote it as a digital era. And this is not in context of how the audience has to react to bringing in digitization in the function, but more broader in terms of how do you prepare yourself in terms of addressing your key stakeholders, because the organization is making a big shift into technology-enabled digitization, straight-through process. I think the list in terms of the jargons I can use is endless, but you understand the transition you see across industries. How do people upskill to face off with the new set of demands which are essential to create the right impact from a human capital standpoint and a human resources point of view?
See, this is where it goes back to the statements I made earlier, right? HR must think ahead of the curve. HR must understand and be deeply embedded into business to know what all is happening, right? I mean, we speak digitization. Today, business models are being disrupted, right? You might have been an FMCG company, you might have worked in certain manner, you might have said, look, I've got the clout on distributors, etc. Business completely changed. You've got large e-com players, they've got the clout, you don't have the clout. Your distributor strategy itself completely changed. You speak about straight-through processing. It's not only in financial services, I think it is across all different type of companies where everything is being digitized. What does all this mean to an HR person? It means that the way my organization itself is structured must change. Right? It cannot continue functioning the same way because I don't have the need for doing it. Second, with all of this digitization change happening, do I have the talent pool available to be able to harness everything that's going on in the technology world? Does my organization facilitate for that talent pool to thrive? Am I able to attract it? Similarly, on the business side of it, how do I upskill my people to turning around and getting them to recognize that this is how you can leverage technology, right? And this is the type of new leader do I need, right? In the past, I might have had a great leader. He might have worked in that era. He might have done everything. But with this entire change happening, where am I today and how I could possibly be operating tomorrow, am I grooming those kind of leaders? Will I be able to switch from one leader to another in that new era, or will I yet be stuck with that entire old lot of people, and therefore then I will struggle to deliver, they will not allow leadership talent to groom below them, and it hurts me. Right? So those are several things that HR can do to support an organization that's going through that entire change curve. How is HR themselves using technology? Right? Today, if you see, there is so much technology available to the process that you would follow from right from the hiring stage to bringing them on board, onboarding them, to staying engaged with them, to driving performance from them, right? There is so much of technology that HR themselves could be using in their own functions to be a much more connected organization. We speak about L&D, we talk about bringing people to the table. That era is gone where you need to only put people into classrooms. There is so much great content that you can curate, you can put out in front of them, make it engaging. There is so much that you can afford to gamify and get your employees engaged to work back through with you. Is my CHRO equipped? Is my CHRO, just as I expect my business leader to think, are they going to use technology to make a world of difference to how they operate? Right? So this is my expectation that I would have. This is how I believe CHRO should operate.
Thank you again, Sunil, and I'll quickly get in Nagesh as well. You have led verticals related to assurance, ethics, culture, and also regulatory compliance, just in terms of what would be your advice in terms of how do you shape leadership thinking and mindset to address some of these very critical aspects as you see in the current environment, wherein needless to say, across all businesses there is a significant regulatory oversight.
I think once again, don't think that I'm criticizing the HR function alone, but I think the entire organization is responsible for it. So when it comes to ethics framework, you will see by and large, people at lower level, if they are found doing something wrong, will get sacked as soon as possible. And people will say, we got rid of him in just, 10 days time kind of thing. At the same time, the same kind of thing that is done by a person who is very senior in the hierarchy, there is a trend which comes in, and that happens in the presence of HR also, to say, but he has been working with us for 15 years. Yeah, we have seen quite a few great kind of performance coming out of that thing. Maybe he has not thought it like that. So these kind of things do keep on happening. And I see HR people also, they don't even look at us number of times, but they look at the people at the down thing. That shows that their independence is impaired on that account. Well, I think this is where I think all of us, we need to look at it, ethics. It should start from here, from your own heart first, and to the organization on that account. That doesn't happen, and then that is where you start losing little confidence in the people's mind on that account. And that has happened to me in quite a few companies where I felt that probably HR could have taken a serious role based on the circumstances and documentary evidence that they have, rather than interpreting it for the benefit of the doubt. Because one size fits all should be the criteria in these kind of things. And this is where ethics and things will come in. Similarly, in compliance also you see, and I'm not saying HR alone is responsible, even our finance function and everybody is responsible. Zero tolerance should be the policy. Here we tend to take a view, but sir, it got, deferred a bit because of lack of X, lack of Z. So these kind of things becomes a bit of a challenge on that account. And we are all independent directors. We have no stake in the matter. We are looking at the interest of the people. We are looking at the interest of the regulators. We need to be very careful about how we position ourselves on that account. And I think eventually this body language, if it gets carried out in the organization, it might create problems. So I think HR people are the representative of that. They have to create right kind of culture to say, we do make mistakes, commit those mistakes, and work on that particular part. And I think this is the real work which people will have to do very, very consistently on that account.
Thank you for your candid comments. I hope we have a safe passage out of this banquet hall. I'll quickly maybe get last bites, Sunil. Again, how do you see the future in terms of leadership and leadership skills, attributes? What would be your advice in terms of how do a lot of us gear ourselves to that aspirational point which we started off with, saying that how do I make that impact? What is the skill which I need to qualify to sit in that boardroom? And what will the demands of the future in terms of how human skills need to be fine-tuned, how this is going to change, and what are the demands coming through from the industry?
To keep my answer short and simple, got my eye out there on the clock. I would think that the first one is really about agility and adaptability. I think today's leaders need to be agile, they need to be adaptable, because markets are changing fast. If you don't pick up signals, you aren't able to imbibe in them and aren't able to put it in yourself, you can't put it in your organization. And today, an organization that is not agile, not adaptable, will frankly lose. The second part, I think, leadership skill, which is going to be very important, in my opinion, is relationships, right? Relationships, whether you have it with your employees, whether you have it with your shareholders, whether you have it with your regulators, whether you have it with your auditors, whoever they are, right? I think the ability of a leader to build those relationships, and what you're talking is about connect, being able to communicate with them, being able to onboard them and engage with them. I think that is the second skill. The third one I would clearly think is around innovation. Today's marketplace demands innovation, whether it is product innovation, whether it is market innovation, whether it is how do you work with a ecosystem and innovate things around you. It requires innovation. And therefore, I believe strong leaders will have those capabilities, and I will restrict it to these three. There's a lot more other stuff from running the business, managing operations, doing all of that side of it. But these three for me are key leadership skills that I think will be in demand.
Yeah. Thanks, Sunil.
I think just to add on to what Sunil has said, I will tell you what I do at my age. I'm past retirement on that account. I at least spend 1 hour in a day looking at what's the digital marvelous things that are happening on that account, and for which I try to get a lot of information from the youngsters. So that is one. Second one is, I always believe that we should not behave in a digital migrant kind of perspective. We should be digital native. So what we were doing earlier and how I can translate it into digital thing is a wrong way to look at it. We have to start thinking what is needed to be done, and there are ways and means of doing it. So that's the second one. Believe in reverse mentoring, and this is a very critical part. I think at my age, I have people who are starting from 40 backwards, 40, 30, 20, and my daughter's also in that typical thing. I keep on referring a lot of things, and they also keep on sending us a lot of information of what's happening on that account. So this is important. And last but not least, which I always believe we should do, is whatever we are doing it in terms of digital thing, we have to see to it that we complete this. We have a lot of tendency to start in a very euphoric manner. We get excited about it and we leave it halfway through, and then we feel that we are not doing it. So come out with idiot-proof kind of process so that there are no mistakes that are happening, and do it straight through kind of processing, and that is very critical on that account. I think these are some of the things that you have to start thinking. A lot of people will come out as a success people in that particular thing.
Sure. So thank you very much, and Sunil and Nagesh, both of you. I think your comments and views reflect vintage and experience, and also a pulse on the evolving landscape and what is needed from a leadership standpoint. I have been, being messaged that I overshoot significantly, but thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure just as I have benefited from this conversation, you have all have some points to take away from this discussion. Thank you very much.